Okay, so I think we are live now. Barring my cat throwing everything on my desk off my desk because she wants to get at the cheese puffs. We're good to go. Hi, hello. Welcome to all the people on the internet who either are watching this or may watch this one day. My name is Care. I'm Care Alexi. I'm writing. Hey, it's Candy Ways. All right. Candy says hi. I'm Kara Alexi, and I will let each of you just give a quick intro. We want to go with who's next to me.
Yeah, Shayna. Hi, I'm Shayna Begay. I am me. I'm scientist by day, pretend writer by night.
10 right on my ass. Talia, you next.
Well, I guess I'm published, so there you go.
Talia.
Hi, I am Talish Vari. I read, write, edit in Trinidad and Tobago. And yeah, next.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, go for it.
I'm Bree from Brooklyn, New York. Scientist by day, writer by night.
And Sidal Crosby in New York, but from Trinidad, and just all around creator by day and night. Well, actually, by day legal assistant, which is a thing. So, yeah.
Which is less exciting, but you know, yeah. still in existence.
Thing that I do as well.
All right, cool. So today we're certainly chatting about a book because that's what we do. I'm gonna read Sidal. This is Sidal's pick for a book club. So I'm going to read the blurb for the book, and then Sai, you will get to tell us why you picked this book and your thoughts, and then we can all jump in because I know this book being written by Trini diaspora and is a story about Trinis in Trinidad. I know we have feelings. I know we have feelings. Right? Mm-hmm. So in this book, this book is Till the Well Runs Dry, a novel by Lauren Francis-Sharma. A glorious and moving multi-generational, multicultural saga that sweeps from the 1940s through the 1960s in Trinidad and the United States. In a seaside village in the north of Trinidad, young Marcia Garcia, a gifted and smart-mouthed 16-year-old seamstress, lives alone, raising 2 small boys and guarding a family secret. When she meets Farouk Karam, an ambitious young policeman, so taken with Marcia that he elicits help from a tea-brewing obeah woman to guarantee her ardor, the rewards and risks in Marcia's life amplify forever. Till the Well Runs Dry sees Marcia and Farouk from their sassy and passionate courtship through personal and historical events that threaten Marcia's secret, entangle the couples and their children in a tumultuous scandal, and put the future in doubt for all of them. With this deeply human novel, Lauren Francis-Sharma gives us an unforgettable story about a woman's love for a man, a mother's love for her children, and a people's love for an island rich with calypso and carnival, cricket and salty air, sweet fruits and spicy stews, a story of grit, imperfection, steadfast love, and of Trinidad that has never been told before. I want to say something, but I promised I would explain first what it is she picked this book.
Go for it.
That is a lie. Every story in this blasted book been told before. Right. All right, I'm good now. Sidal is all you.
Yes, Sidal, why you picked this book?
I picked this book because it was a recommendation from a friend, actually. Like, I have a long reading list, but I wanted to read more things from Trinidad, and I've also just been craving home a lot more than recently. And there aren't many channels I can flip to and just like watch content that's made and sounds like Trinidad. So I was like, oh, this would be a great time to get some Trini stuff and feel like a Trini voice. This is like a great way to bring that into my life. And so it was a recommendation from a friend. No idea what the book was about. I said this last week. No idea what the book was about. And no knowledge about the writer beforehand. And so Kaya messages me this week and she's like, I'm reading this book and I can't. And I hadn't started yet. I literally just finished it just before this. But her complaint is the same as mine of why is all writing out of Trinidad stuck in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? Like does nothing happen after that? Like, do we have such a hard time grappling with contemporary like socialization that we can't imagine a world where technology and the river, like those two things cannot exist. You either have going to the river or playing on your computer. Like they cannot intermingle at all.
Ladies, what's going on in Trini right now that y'all don't want to write about?
Exactly.
We don't know. We don't know.
I have had theories that I've shared before.
Yeah, so
I've shared on 15 Dogs.
My theory about this is specifically, it's not that those books and those things about Trinidad don't exist or people not writing it, you know. That is not the story white publishing wants to hear. That is not the story. Exactly. That is not the story white publishing wants to hear from Trinidad. It is not.
So if you make it historical, then they like it, right?
Yes.
I mean, I can
like
identify with that too. Yeah.
Has Trinidad left the 50s period? Benra, I like you, you know, horse. The one little interaction I did have with you before, you're cool, brother. But listen to me.
You're pushing
we
it.
have left the 50s, okay? We have left the 50s too. Listen, I so fed up with this boy. Because if we're not writing like his song in like VS Blasted Naipaul and he races ourselves, then you mustn't be writing, right? What I can't. It upsets me. I'm gonna hush because all I'm going to do is Candy says me in Trinidad right now on a computer, but not allowed to exist in a river because of Panini. You see? If nothing else, we exist in this century because of COVID. Right? Anyway, I just think that's it. That's the story. It's some kind of like, you know how they have poverty porn? I think this is
tropical porn.
It's global South porn. It's Caribbean colonization porn. Right?
How much time people get into a Julie Mango, like specifically a Julie Mango?
Apparently,
song about the variety of mangoes in Trinidad and Tobago, and in the entire book, all I can hear about is a Julie. Now, granted, we have a friend named Julie Mango, right? So you know, it's like fine, but nobody had a calabash mango tree. Nobody eat a little rose mango. Nobody make a little long, you know,
a little doodoo's,
nothing. A little starch mango. Like right now, you looking for, you know, you want to find out about somebody. What are you? Are you a Julie Mango person or are you a starch mango person? Right? This book suffered. Like I try to view the book on its own merits. Let's pretend this is the only book that's ever written about it, right? Because it is, at the end of the day, this is the story of her family, right? So I'm going to give her
the story of her family, writer?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's loosely based.
It's the story
the story of her own family.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that she was Trini. She's born in New York, etc. Because I read that in her bio in the book. But I didn't know anything else about the book as far as it was based on. Honestly, anyway, just go ahead. I'm gonna hush my mouth.
Yeah, like like she's heard this story so many times. You know what I mean? She's grown up on this story, but there were certain like little things that took me out of the moment. And I'll give you when the father told the daughter, your freedom papers burn. I had to stop what I was doing. Come outside the office. It's like, Miguel, you ever hear the term freedom papers burn or freedom papers burn? He said, no, what is that? I say, free paper burn. He said, oh, what kind of book you reading? And I had to tell him, no, it's written by somebody who is of Trini descent, but not necessarily Trini. You know what I mean?
I feel you, but you also have to give space for the idea that she's not writing for Trinis.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, but
so
at least free paper burn. At least if you're going to utilize the slang, but you're going to anglicize it, do it properly. It's not freedom papers have been burnt. Free paper burn. I will give you that. I'm very generous with this book. You're going to realize I'm going to be very, very generous with this book. Probably a little bit more generous than I was with the book from my pick, right? But that one line is like, oh yes. I was like, no. What I'm saying is I'm going to be more forgiving of certain things, right? I did read this and I'm like, okay, I generally do not like literary fiction. And I started getting that kind of vibe that this was, I was like, okay, I'm reading this more like a domestic thriller set in that period. You know what I mean? And like that is how I was able to enjoy the book, so to speak. Because when I'm reading, I want to enjoy it. It's a hobby. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And it's like, okay, I'm going to pretend this is the only type of book that this has, this is the only book out of Trinidad kind of thing, and rate it on its own merits. I'm not going to compare it to Paul. I'm not going to compare it to almost any other Caribbean writer. I'm going to give her her merits. And there were little things that kind of sold her out that she did not grow up in Trinidad. And that Freedom Paper Burn was one of it.
So I want to add something to that, but and right after a say more one of many, because I had no 2 cents for this today, man. I had real sense for this today. But honestly, just say one thing, and I want to Gil. And then I want to talk to I want to hear Bree and Shay's thoughts, because right now the 3 Trinis are just like rah, 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 and nobody else saying
anything. What we don't like. We like here.
We right? Americans are staying very silent.
So I do.
We're following your lead.
I've heard I had an encounter earlier this year where someone who is of Jamaican descent who visited Jamaica often, but didn't grow up or like live in Jamaica, right? She did visit. I read a book. It was a fantasy novel by her, and I went into that book with the same kind of feelings that books like this just give me. I just always read books by people because and when Kevin Turrett, who signed recently, got a book deal, and he is a Trini author, born and raised in Trini, still living on Trini soil, right? And I think that we will perhaps, at least I know, and I mean based on the post that he wrote, we were so proud of the fact that he is Trini on Trini soil, because you have plenty people there putting out work, creative work or otherwise, that is getting international recognition, and it is what's it looking for? It's they're Trini born, or they are the child of Trini parents, right? Or they're Caribbean born, or they're the child of Caribbean parents. They're not people still living and breathing and working here like us, right? Well, maybe not Sidel Trini born now, because she
She's foreign.
She foreign now. She foreign.
I just get
she foreign.
What?
No, but here's the thing. I went into that book with that feeling, and I realized that when I went in with that attitude because of books like this, and since I read that one book, because I was like, man, I just always read these things by Trini-born people or Caribbean-born people and people who are really here, and they just try to write about this experience, and they just get it wrong, and it is really rubbed me the wrong way. And I have no problem if you want to write about your experience as someone who's living between worlds, because when you embrace that story you write will be fantastic and authentic. And I appreciate what it's like to straddle worlds, because we've talked multiple times about how much, I had to leave behind to be able to survive at school in the US, and then how much I didn't fit in here at home anymore, right? Like, just the way I'm speaking right now, people, if I speak to like this to other people here in Trinidad, they'll be like, where you from? Where you from? Yeah, from here, have an accent, right? And even that is not how they will say accent, right? Because that's not how it sounds when you're speaking like a Trini. So like I can appreciate that thing where like you're not from here, but you're embracing the fact that you're not really from here. You're from more than one place, and you engage with that. You're in more than one place. You're from more than one place, right? And honestly, that book was brilliant. And I felt like a total ass going into that other book that I was reading, being like, oh, gee, there's going to be some other, semi-Caribbean person who tried to write about some kind of Caribbean experience and really just shit in the bed. Like, that's what I thought, but it turned out to be a brilliant book. And that book spoiled me. Because then I did read this one. And it's not to say that it's not a Caribbean experience or that this writer's experience is invalid or that this writer is not Trini or doesn't deserve to talk about her Trini roots or anything, Is really just like Nicola said, there are some things that really give away the facts that you probably don't really know what the ass you're talking about. No. And the thing is that the only people who were a backstop for you were either other Trinis who didn't know or don't remember or don't understand or didn't have the heart to tell you the right thing, or a bunch of white people who do less. Right? I'm like that's probably my mother earlier. That's why she's not screaming down the place on YouTube right now. Because you know how when Angela reads, she just have opinions in the chat. Anyway. So
She's doing it on stream or?
That will be a whole story. I don't know. We'll see, I'm sure she will stick her head in and be like, anyway. But that is I have a lot of feelings around that. Like, I don't think that because you're not born here or you didn't grow up here, you have no right to write about what life is like here. But I feel like when you do that, I want to see some kind of recognition that you are both an insider and an outsider. Like, I want to see that embracing of all of the different parts and not just, no, I am a Trini and all I am is a Trini and that is all you have in this experience, except then it's not a genuine experience for people who are just Trini. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I know what you mean.
She did it well in one scene. There's one scene.
She did it well, and I think she did it well in more than one scene, But the problem,
but there was one scene that stood out to me, and that was the airport scene.
Oh God. Anyway, Anyway, so let's go Seidel, because Seidel, this is your book, and I want to hear your views and your feelings. A lot. I want to hear a lot of that, and then I also want after Seidel, Talia, you and I need to hush for a second because I talking because I have feelings. And then we'll talk to
feelings.
Shayna.
Yeah.
Shayna, you have to go soon too because it's 4th of July in America and that's Independence Day. So you guys gonna go barbecue pig and shit. So let's talk. Let's go Seidel and then Bree and Shay.
Yeah. I agree with your point and hear what you're saying. But I also have to push back and say not everybody's Trinidadian experience is the same. Like, Trinidadians are not a monolith. Some people will have experienced things and other people have no idea.
If we are not a monolith, why all of our stories from the 40s and 60s? If we are not a monolith, why all of our stories from the 40s to 60s?
I agree. And all
living next door.
I agree. I agree entirely. There's that weird juxtaposition of wanting to tell individual story, but also setting up the place as having the same experiences in the same places. And it's like, that's not true to what it means to be a human at all. Far less to be Trinidadian. It's really a spit in the face on the complexities and the nuance and the multi-layeredness of Trinidad.
Okay, that's completely fair. And I concede to that point. Absolutely. No, you're right. It's not a monolith in my experience. I think it's certainly not everybody's, but I guess it doesn't change the fact that I will read something and I'll be like, what Trini would really describe it the way you just described this boy? Or what Trini really does only, like, it's one thing if it is only a Julie mango, but that's the only mango,
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? Those are the things.
Yeah, some sort of supporting evidence in the writing that you have. You are straddling some sort of some sort of
supporting evidence, the writing that what you are saying is not the only experience.
Yeah.
That's actually, I think that's, and thank you for saying that, Seidel, because I really feel like that's what it comes down to, is that it's okay if the experience you're describing is yours and yours alone, but the way some things are written are often like, this is the only possible experience.
Yeah.
Like not one of the children could have been like, oh God, Julie Bango again. Why I can't have X kind of mango instead? It's mango season, we have all kind of different kind of mango. Why I couldn't get no little starch mango or Dudu's mango? No, not one of the children could give us anyway.
And nobody was running down plum.
Yeah,
I ain't hear no reference
it's
to
really,
plum.
it's really not a real thing.
that is not a real thing. And that is what I mean. That is what I mean. All right, sorry. We said that we go fashion and let the Americans say the piece. So, Shayna and Bree.
Let's see. I'll go first because I gotta run.
Okay.
So this being the only book I've ever read that kind of, well, fully, right, that read that, was kind of trying to depict the story, like a person's story in Trinidad, right? And like me having been to Trinidad, like even I kind of got this sense of like, this is interesting, it's intricate. I thought it was really well written in some sections, right? And I could appreciate some sections and stuff just kind of having, like just evidence of good writing. But even then I kind of felt like, oh, I felt like I was a tourist again and having like bits of like history and culture kind of peppered throughout. So I definitely picked up on that current. And I was like, I thought it was woven into the story like very well. Again, evidence of a good author trying to like weave in elements of, the culture and the country and the history. But at the same time, like I'm reading through the story and I'm like, I know this is supposed to be literary fiction, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, it sounds like frighteningly similar to a lot of, books, like kind of similar literary fiction books that I had, I've read kind of about the American Southwest, how it fantasizes everything about the Southwest, always talking about, the desert and the sand and all the rock formations. And then of course, like native history being about when, we were, kind of elegantly gleaming over the fact that we were held in internment camps and forced on death marches across the desert and held, without any food or supplies. But, they would just romanticize the fact that, we were free roaming people and that, we, had all these different kind of encounters with, people from different missions and, being saved by people. And I don't know, it just kind of gave me that weird feeling of like, I've read this story before, but of course in a very different sense. And like I was a little disappointed in that, but at the same time, being that I have some familiarity with Trinidad and Tobago and a little familiarity with the culture, that I was kind of like, well, I do recognize some truth in that, but at the same time, I was just trying to focus on like the story and how it was trying to touch on different aspects of it. And, it wasn't definitely a wide picture, but I thought it did a pretty good job of trying to provide some depth and some view into, kind of the multi-storied history of the Caribbean. Because I feel like when, especially like American or other people outside of the Caribbean, like when they think about the Caribbean, they think about Jamaica and Jamaica and Jamaica. And then maybe beaches after that. But, and I kind of thought that, the fact that they would touch on things about, it's more than just an island destination for tourists to show up. And, and that's kind of when I learned the first time I came to Trinidad, like kind of what I learned about it too. And I kind of felt like it kind of peeled back some of those layers a little bit, but like not in the depth that I think I'm hearing from you guys that you needed. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of enjoyed the writing, maybe not the whole story to begin with, because again, it kind of just it brought me back to things that I've heard that are similar to my culture and history that books have been written about. And I'm happy now that we have other stories being written about Native American history and culture, but for a long time, long stretches, it's only been about the late 1800s and about how the American military dominated us. And it's kind of nice to be finally stepping away from that. And I hope that's where your guys's history and culture can be headed soon. But this is what it reminded me of very heavily. With that, I gotta run, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping in, Jay.
Bye.
Thank you.
It was good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm gonna go roast myself into submission. Bye.
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 All right.
And
Bree. BL says that it's one reason they don't like World War II Holocaust films media. Yeah. All right, Bree, tell us.
So I liked it in that I felt it gave me sort of a window into. I was actually excited to talk about this with you guys because I'm like, oh, I want to see how it compares. And now I'm like, oh, maybe, but for me, reading it as a total outsider, I found it very interesting. I actually opened up a map of Trinidad because I'm like, where is Blanchishe? Where is, Tunapuna? And I was kind of like, figuring it out in my head a little bit. So I got interested in Trinidad. So it did that for me. But my biggest gripe with this book is communication. Talk to people about your feelings. If somebody says something that hurts you, you talk to them. And if you have a secret, you tell your husband, because your husband is your partner in life and they are to keep all your secrets and to hide from your husband. It's why they were miserable the whole damn book, because they could not communicate.
I just want to point out that this issue of communication is a deeply West Indian problem.
It's very Caribbean, yeah.
It is
Very
a very
Caribbean.
Caribbean problem, right? But I say West Indian. My mom once pointed out, and I mean now I'm kind of like, God damn it! Now she needs to be in the chat to talk about this. But she mentioned that the Caribbean and the Caribbean and the West Indies are two different things. Yeah. Is that when we say you are West Indian, we are embracing all the dumb crap that comes with being West Indian and coming from here. We are embracing the colorism and the racism. We are embracing the classism. We are embracing the language. We are embracing, what all of the pain that comes with having been a country that was not just, these islands were just colonized, but then these people who live on these island now were brought here against their will for the most part, right? The majority populations were brought here against their will. Even the indentured laborers, this is not where they were planning to be. They were planning to come here, right? Like I have stories within my own family that they thought that they were going to just a different part of India or a different part of that continent. And then they found themselves halfway across the world and had no idea how to get back in touch with the rest of their family, right? They were kidnapped. They were also like raped and stuffed into ships like sardines, And I mean, I certainly don't want to compare it to what enslaved people's experience, but at the end of the day, both sets of peoples came here unwillingly for the most part, So we live on an island that was colonized by people who colonized our places of origin, right? And who did not see us as whole human beings. And when you say that you're West Indian, you're embracing that history and all it means to come from those roots. And when we say the word Caribbean, we're talking about palm trees
Tourism.
and beaches and you understand? Sipping a little margarita, sandals, beach resorts.
In a hammock, yeah.
A hammock, oh God, a hammock in the breeze. Like that is what it means when you say Caribbean. Yeah. Shayna just mentioned that she's going to join us in the chat as she can. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, and I do think that this book was well written. I will give the author that. This book was really well written. I think for the most part, her imagery was really well done and fantastic. This was a beautifully written book. I just am getting fed up.
We've read it before.
Every single Trini read this straight throughout secondary school. That is all that they'll give us to read. Oh, good Trini literature, Caribbean literature. Read this one story written in 10 different ways for the rest of your life. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that as human beings, Caribbean or not Caribbean, right? Perhaps there is only but 1, 2, 3 stories or so that we tell all the time. I can appreciate that concept, that idea, that we have archetypal stories, right? I can appreciate that idea. But this, it's not all Caribbean stories are from the 40s through 60s. Not all Caribbean stories need to be about the misogyny not just of that time, but that we're continuing to experience. Not all Caribbean stories need to be about bad parents. Okay.
Which marriage in that book was good? You read of any, like even the neighbor?
Single healthy
Not
marriage.
even the neighbor had a healthy marriage.
I don't think anybody in this book was happy ever. There was that one moment of happiness. And I kept waiting. I'm like, somebody's going to get a break. Somebody's going to get something good to happen to them. No, because even at the end, when you think there's this budding romance with the daughter and her teacher,
right,
they don't even get together. And so you're like, they don't even get to be happy. Now they're separated. And you think he's going to go to America to see her? I don't think so. So I think that romance is over. So they're miserable. So everybody's miserable.
And I will say that that was one of the things that I had told Seidel, was that this book is too realistic. I am so fed up. It's the idea of writing pain. Yeah. Is that with people of color in particular, they love to exemplify these stories of pain. And there are so many stories out there that are just stories of pain. And it's why we have the like the Black Boy Joy movement of books that are about people of color, particularly Black people, that are not about their pain or their suffering, right? This book is not that. This book is a book about the pain. This book is a book about the shit. This book is a book about the crap and the trash and the horrible things. And
I don't even feel like this is West Indian. This doesn't even feel, it doesn't feel like a Trini story. This is her grandmother's coming to America story. This is why she left, because of this and that and the other, and this is why this whole book was leading up to her coming to America moment, right?
Which was just one sentence at the very end.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
It was one sentence.
That is what
I've never been happier than I am now, or I think I feel happiness now, was the last sentence.
Right.
So you only get a taste of happiness after 400 pages of misery.
And I think it's a very West Indian thing, because I do know of, like my own mom, right? If somebody's complaining about their child, she needs to complain about her child too.
Just to interrupt briefly to give some screen time to folks in the chat. Candy says, yes, for fuck's sake, give me books without all of this goddamn trauma.
Without all this goddamn trauma.
Right? And then Shayna says, this reminded me of the movie Requiem for a Dream. It just kept going from bad to worse. Yeah. Sorry, Talia. I did not mean to interrupt.
No. We're doing that. But the thing is, like, okay, like I kind of knowing that it was biographical or, based on a true story kind of thing, I kind of gave it that moment. Because there's a lot of things that we will go through, like if we're talking about, well, this is my marriage, and this is my relationship, and there are certain things that would occur. You know what I mean? There's the meeting, there's the falling in love, there's the won't I, will he won't he, will they won't they kind of thing, and then happily ever after working towards it, So yeah, there's parts of the story that make sense, and there's things that we all go through that are kind of universal, right? And I like I said, I try to give it that grace due to the fact that it's based on a true story. A couple of the grouses that I had is that, one, it was, you're telling it from a particular perspective. And there's the I moments where I am Jacqueline, or I am Marcia, or I am, what was the father's name again?
Farouk.
Him. Farouk.
There we go.
Or I am Farouk, right? If I am Farouk and I am telling my story, there's certain things that I would say, and the way that I would speak would be different. And like I said, it was the little moments that took me out of it. And I think it was a bad style choice that as a Trinidadian, I would have picked up on. Now, if she had written it as, and my grandmother and my grandfather and Farouk and my mother Jacqueline.
It wasn't written, Jacqueline. I see what you're saying. You feel like the first person point of view interrupted what would otherwise have been sort of a genuine retelling if you had done it in third person. Okay.
Yeah, Because like, okay, this is a retelling of a story. It's a retelling of a true story. But last week we did the retelling of a fiction story.
I didn't mind
You
the
know
first
what I mean?
person.
So no, I didn't mind the first person either. But like I said, as a like an actual Trini, I was able to spot the inconsistencies in her quote unquote Trininess. You know what I'm saying?
So you would have preferred a more distinct voice, I'm assuming, for each character, a more distinct sound and a more distinct vocabulary to distinguish each character and sort of solidify them as their own person, because she's chosen this sort of first person narrative form. Versus if she was a retelling, it would have been more acceptable for the language to kind of sound the same in terms of the voice of the speaker.
There's another writer that Karen and I know, and he writes erotica. And whatever, and she shivered with pleasure. He's writing me, so it's writing from his perspective. Guyven, now you have my call, right? And it was just this one, and I remember pointing it out, and it was like, I think it was like I said, how do you know it's that? Suppose the room was just cold. Suppose the AC just kicked in and you know, blow some cold breeze on her back while she's naked, and she's like, oh, surprise, and you think that's like orgasmic. No, if you're telling it from, if you are being a genuine author, you cannot write about her experience, right?
It's breaking the point of view. Yeah, because if you're telling something, I can't say that you shivered with pleasure, right? Because I don't know what you shivered with. I could say that you shivered and perhaps that pleased me, because I assumed or I felt like perhaps that was your pleasure, but I can't say that was your pleasure. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
I want to
what were you going to say? Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see. Yeah, my camera's actually blocking a little bit of Bree. So, Bree, I can see all of you now, so that's great. Bree, tell me what you were going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what I was going to say.
I felt like you were going to say something when Tanya was talking, and I just wanted to hear what you had to say.
Yeah. Seidel, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I want to touch on that idea of first person and the language, because there was the thought I had on that as well.
Say again.
I wanted to know if you had anything to say, like connected to what Talia was talking about, because I have some thoughts on that as well.
I guess I need a more directed question. I didn't mind the first person writing. I felt similarly in the sense of some of the so I did audiobook.
Me too.
Yeah.
I thought that it had two readers, so I felt distinct because of the performance.
Right. So similarly, yes, but then there was also this kind of some of the distinction that I'm assuming I would have gotten maybe from age, in terms of the amount of experience that a person have lived. Some of the language felt the same in that regard, and so I wish there was more of a distinction in that way of like, oh, I'm definitely writing a 13-year-old who's had these kinds of experiences. You know what I mean? But it wasn't so much so that it was jarring for me to experience or listen to.
Yeah, I don't think that it was jarring for me either, but something, because I'm writing using Creole, right, in my dialogue. And when I was doing that, I didn't think too hard, because I mean, I'm still in a drafting stage where I know I have the opportunity to go back and tweak and fix and like, you know, increase the distinctness of the language between different characters. But I had sent, because I was so concerned about it, it was the first time that I was writing using Creole for an audience. I mean, obviously I write like that for myself when I write like that for myself, right? But it's for me alone. I don't care what nobody else say. But when I'm writing with the intention that an audience will eventually read this, I have to care about that audience. And so I sent it to another Trini reader, and they were like, the language was written fine, except everybody sounded the same. And I was like, okay, but why? And I had to sit down with myself and try to figure out, why does everybody sound the same? And I realized that when you are writing Creole, we have certain methods, there's sentence structuring that we use that is obviously different to how the English language is written, right? And everybody uses that structuring for the most part. Some people, the people who code switch within a sentence, and the people who are speaking both English and Creole in that one sentence, they will have some distinctness. And she did point out that that one character who speaks mostly formal English and has some Creole like in it, that one sounded different. But then the others, I recognize that when you write it, and I'm sure that this is simply me as a writer, I need to graduate to another level of writing Creole, right? And that will come with practice. I'm not going to beat myself up about that too much. But when I read it, each person sounded different to me. And I realized that's because I am giving them inflections in different places on my own. Because the sentence that somebody would use to say something might be the same for everyone, but everyone would say it differently, right? And I think that that is perhaps a challenge that this writer may have encountered as well, is that you are writing this the way somebody else would say it, or the way you think you would say it, or somebody that you know would say it. But then when you give it to other people, they're like, no, this is the right sentence. That's what I would say. You ask 10 different Trinis, yeah, that's what I would say. But it will sound different when each of them says it, because even though there are patterns in our speech that are distinct throughout all of our language, there are other like small inflections, like where I might see, come now, right? Somebody else will say, come now.
Yeah, so
And
much
then
of
my-
our Creole is predicated on the intonation of the way of, of the sentence, not just the words used in the sentence.
Yes. And I am not a linguist. I do not know how to write that in a word. And if somebody wrote NAH and then NAH where there was some other thing going on with the A so that it indicated a different sound, I would be like, what's that? What's that? I don't know how to read it.
Yeah.
You know? So I can appreciate that. I did feel that sometimes the language, even the language that wasn't written in Creole, it did feel, I could see what you mean. Like, it didn't bother me, but now that you've pointed it out, I did find that there was a certain sameness to the points of view that could have been made more distinct. But I can also appreciate that after something goes through editing, sometimes that becomes more uniform than you, the writer, intended it to be. And so whether that is an issue with the writer or an issue with editorial choices that we made, I mean, I couldn't say, you know.
I did like the Creole that she did get right. She did really well, though.
Yeah. I think that the Creole that was written, I think she honestly, like, that is one thing that I will not fault this book for at all, is that I felt when I was reading the Creole that I was like, I'm going to take some of this Creole as a model for how to spell and write Creole in my own book. Like, some of it was already the same as kind of what I was using, but it was, but I like how it was done here. There were things I didn't like. There were things I didn't like as well, but there were things that I liked. And so Shayna says, did anyone else listen to the audiobook? It had a change in narrators, which the change in first person perspective, it helped. But don't get me started on the accents used. And then Shayna also says the narrators really helped to highlight the change in voice that was written. And yeah, I that's why I'm saying I think that there's a big difference in like how each person says something. So tell me about the accents, because apparently Ollie listened to the audiobook.
Right. I'm now looking up because I was supposed to do this since yesterday and I forgot. I can't even find it really. But so it was narrated by a man and a woman, maybe two women. I don't remember. But a man and a woman. So you got that break, and then you also get nice intonations for the different female characters. But they are not Trinis. I don't know if the man is Trini, I couldn't tell, but I feel like the woman is definitely Grenadian or Guyanese. They are not Trinis. Or maybe if they are Trinis, just Trinis that I never heard accent for in my life. But when it started, I was like, interesting. Okay, maybe she's just like a Trini who like living abroad for a while, or maybe she's like a Trini who live not in Trinidad for a while. But then there were some pronunciations where I was like, this is very distinctly Jamaican, or this is very distinctly Grenadian. This is not how a Trini would say this word at all. Like, even when they tried to pronounce words, oh my God, what was the place? There was a place that she pronounced, and I was like, oh yeah, this is not Trini. This is not Trini.
Oh my God,
it wasn't Blanchard, but it was a pronunciation of something, and I was just like, not a Trini. I knew it. That was the confirmation that I knew it.
I'm trying to think of one of the places. There were the places where Sandy Grandi.
Sao.
Was it Sao?
They talk about, okay, the Kwese, The kirose.
Hold on.
Yes,
That is,
hold
it
on.
was spelled.
Hey,
Yes.
Okay,
You
good.
know, in the book, I was reading the quasi in the book, and I was like, what is that?
When Sour is that?
What
I live
is
in
that?
Sour. I can
I
walk
had
to
to
the
sit
crazy,
down.
and I was like,
I had to sit down, and it was the Quirorsair or something like that, Orsay. And then I was just like,
kid or say.
whatever. That is how it is really, because we just spell it Croisee. That's how I just spell quizzy.
I don't even know
That's
how
how. That is like the. That is the. accent.
I've never spelled it.
I live in Sour. I live in Sour since
There we go.
a while, a good while. Next year might
Dude,
make
if
it
you
10 years.
Watch me. If you type Croisee into Google, it comes up with, it puts you in the quasi, and then it goes quasi supermarket, quasi grocery store, quasi agro shop. The only problem is all of it in Central.
Yeah, there's a spot in I think Couva. I think it's Couva side.
But apparently, according to Wiktionary, quasi is it does mean an intersection.
Right.
So like that is what, because I just so I don't know, I did not know.
Because
I
you
read
do
that,
have
I was
like French, like my family.
yeah.
A lot of our kids are
is,
French.
my
Yeah.
grandmother's
French,
house French. So we have French. You have French, Spanish, etc. Yeah.
So I
But yes,
read that, and I appreciate that perhaps in the 40s to 60s they said that word or they spelled it to each other differently.
Mhm.
But I was reading that and I was like, is this a place in Sawa?
Where is
I
this?
don't know. Is this a place in Sawa
How
that
long
I
in
have
Sawa?
never heard of? What is that? And I sat down there and pronounced it. I must have spent like a whole 30 to 60 seconds just like this is the quiz that you're talking about?
Yes.
That is-
So the male,
When I spoke about, there were things that took me out of the
was
took me
one of
out
them.
of it. That was, and
One
that
of
is what made me start looking at it much more closely, because she spoke about Tunapuna and a couple of the streets there. I worked in Tunapuna. I know a couple of the streets there. She was in Arima. I from Arima. I born and bred in Arima. I'm a Arima girl. I went to school in Fair Rivers. I know where that school is. The primary school that
Honest to
Yvonne
God,
went to. And you
every
know
time
that-
she was talking,
I know
every
that-
time she started talking about a place, and I was like, this don't make any sense in my head from what I know about my own country's geography. I was just like, let's just assume things was different when she was writing this book, because this is written in the 60s. We are now in 2021, right? I just go in and assume that whatever street it is talking about, it was different then. And you know what? It probably was, Let's be real, it probably was. There's been a lot of change in our geography, where our streets are, what our streets are called, all of that for a long time. But Seidel, you were saying that the male narrator is Bahamian.
The male narrator is Bahamian, and as far as I can find, the female narrator is American. I'm assuming she probably is like second generation or something. She probably has Caribbean parents, but it doesn't make any reference to like any of that heritage for her. But so neither of them are Trinidadian, and it was very evident. It's like cool. Was there a mention of Sukuya somewhere in the book?
Yes.
Okay,
Sukuya,
good.
yes.
So because she said it, and I was like, I feel like she means Sukuya. That is not how it's pronounced that word.
That's how you
Also,
spell
like,
it.
it wasn't spelled the way that we spell it either in the actual text. I remember looking at that and being like, the first time I saw the word, I was like, oh, it's a typo. Oh, well, it happens even in the most well-proofread books. And then I saw it again, and I was like,
no typo.
and then I saw it again, and I went,
it took me too long to figure out that she was talking about a Sukuya.
the
It took me
spelling
too
was
long.
so close, though. It was so close. It was
Yeah.
so close, but it was
The pronunciation
far
was
enough.
not.
Well, how do you pronounce that?
Sorry,
Please tell me.
Bree is
How do you pronounce
really
Bree is
remember.
probably. I feel so bad for Bree because the three of us are so opinionated, and Bree is just like. We also, I recognize, we may be also speaking less for non-Trinidadian audiences right now. So, Bree, have you been able to follow the conversation?
She's like,
Because that, I recognize the look on Bree's face, like my friends who are not Trini.
when
they
they're
hear
in
me
class,
talking
so
to
they're
them,
like, wait, what is happening? How do I follow this?
I am observing.
Yeah.
I'm observing and I am learning.
Okay. So it's your turn. Jump in about, like, I know you said the point of view was cool. You didn't have a really issue with it, but also with the audiobook, it was a little easier.
Easier.
What else? What were some things? Because the Trinities have totally been shitting on all the things we didn't like, right? Which obviously is a lot of things. But I think Seidel made a point earlier on when she said that this was probably just not written for Trinities. And like that's a fact, right? Like when a publisher is picking up a book, they're not like, okay, well, everybody on the island of Trinidad and Tobago read this. No, they are not asking that question. Okay, they don't care. Okay, they do not care.
Yeah. So my
Bree,
experience, so my experience is going to be a little different. Where the same way we read a fantasy or a sci-fi novel, and you kind of just imagine things the way you imagine them. I didn't have a frame of reference the way that you ladies do, where you're like, oh, I've been there. Now, when she went to New York, though, and they're talking about Fulton Street and Marcy Avenue, then I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. So, she's writing the 8th Avenue Express. So in New York City, I was able to kind of compare and listen and because that's my home. But when they were in Trinidad, it was more, let me imagine things to the best of my ability, right? And without a frame of reference, there wasn't really room for too much criticism. So my criticism falls more in line with the fact that it's literary fiction. And I feel like all the arcs were flat. I don't think anybody grew at the end. I think I think Farouk changed a little bit because he threw away his witchcraft tea and he kind of gave up on that. But still, his life was miserable. He kept making mistakes. The daughters kept making mistakes. The mother kept making mistakes. I don't know that anybody actually grew in a traditional character arc. So by the time I got to the end, there was no satisfaction. In fact, I felt exhausted because I just kept waiting for a breath, right? I was waiting between the rapes and the murders and,
the subway.
Yeah, people being
the homelessness.
not knowing if she has a place to sleep or wash herself, like, all of these things, one after the other. It's like I never had a moment in this book of lighthearted. There's always fun and games in most books where you have a moment to breathe and recoup, and there was just, I don't think there was any of that. So by the time we got to the end and we got to that last line that said, she finally felt the little bit of what she thought could be happiness as she's moving to America with her two children, 2 of the 4. That was the only glimmer, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't feel the payoff at the end.
I want to add to that I appreciate that is real, though. I appreciate that, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, there's and in that time period, there were many, many, many people for whom that was life. That was life. You did not get a break. Today, your life is that you don't get a break, and not just in Trinidad. I think that is a realness. There's a realness to that is across countries and across cultures, that you don't get a break, and that is true. That is genuine. But that's why I didn't like this book. I'm not reading this because I want to be reminded of how shitty life is. I'm reading this because I want an escape. This is escapism to me.
Yeah. Okay? So if the author's goal was to make me feel the pain and she accomplished that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is, there were moments. There were actually moments that falls under the fun and games thing. And for me, and it wasn't. And the thing is, it just wasn't long enough. If you know what I mean. Like when Jacqueline went to the fete. Like when Farouk pulled the neighborhood children to play cricket.
Oh, right. One scene.
BL wants to know if it was falsely advertised. But before we get to that question, Seidel, you had something to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, so the critique of telling these stories of pain that was made earlier, while I agree with it, I'm hard pressed to try and fault the author for that, because 1, it's only a story that she knows, and 2, it's a story that for a very long time is the only kind of story that was told and popularized and was monetized. You know what I mean? So I
want to just qualify that. I don't think that's for a very long time, because that's obviously still true today. That is the same kind of story. Yeah. Yeah.
So that the idea of just a regular slice of life, happy go-lucky black boy joy, black girl magic type of story, specifically around any Black experience, is not celebrated. What is celebrated is our ability to endure pain and endure hardship, and our what is the word that I'm looking for? Resilience is always celebrated. The strong Black woman who made it for her family. And while she is real and she does exist, she is not the only thing that exists, and she's not the only part of a Black woman. But for so long, that's the only thing that's been recognized. That's the only thing that's had space to be celebrated. And people trauma bond, you know what I mean? Like, shared trauma is a very real thing. Like, listening to her talk about moving to New York and not having anything and falling apart every second of the way, it was just that's not a new story. I mean, like, a lot of the story, it's not a new thing, you know what I mean? And so it allows people, I guess, to feel and seen and be heard in a way that ordinarily they may not have been. But I do agree that they could have been. I wish there was more of a balance of joy, but then the truth of the matter is that sometimes
there is no balance.
There is no balance of joy, that it is just hard and it is just crappy.
The thing is, I saw opportunities again for the whole fun and game beats kind of thing. There were a lot of opportunities for that. The children grew up reading, right? They were clearly, Jacqueline in particular was very well. I'm quite certain that they would start like, oh God, mommy, again, like a so and so. This is my comfort book, and you saw references to books, right? And you know,
which
I didn't get that.
Was a
like,
thing,
I
like,
knew what
could
it was
you imagine? How hard it was to have books like that. I want to, though, Talia, before we go off on that, I do want to come back to BL's question about if we felt it was falsely advertised. So the very beginning of the beginning of the stream, which I'm not sure that that they were there to see, is that it ends. The blurb on the back is like, excuse me, it's about how this is an unforgettable story about a woman's love for a man, a mother's love for her children, a people's love for an island rich with calypso, carnival, cricket, and salty air, sweet fruits and spicy stews, a story of great imperfections, steadfast love, and of Trinidad that has never been told before. First of all, I think we all agree that this is a lie. This is not a story of Trinidad that has never been told before. Everything in this book about Trinidad has been told before ad nauseum, particularly in this particular time period. I also want to talk about
I'm assuming, I just want to say that maybe the never been told before is a qualifying statement for people consuming media. Yeah, for people consuming media outside of the Caribbean, you know what I mean? Like, we in the Caribbean are familiar with this type of story and are familiar with this type of pain, but a lot of people outside of the Caribbean, and if we're going to use the word Caribbean, are familiar with the Caribbean being this beautiful, breezy palm trees on the beach, lush type of thing. You know what I mean?
But that doesn't make this
that's me creating space.
Yeah, but like I still think that doesn't make the sentence genuine. Like, this is a lie. And if you read this sentence and you have ever read any Caribbean literature, because I looked up, the publishers seem to be American and the agents seem to be American. And I think that the people in the UK are much more, I think, familiar with Caribbean stories, because the people in the UK have been drinking Caribbean stories like is their morning milk for a very long time. But I want to come back to some of the other things that this blurb mentioned, not about the woman's love and the mother's love. First of all, she was a terrible mother. But I will also say that by modern day standards, most West Indian parents are terrible parents. And so I'm going to give you a bly for that. Farouk, same thing, though I think even at that time, he was considered a bad parent. And his
Why did they keep making babies? That's what I wanted to know. It's like he would come, they'd have a night of passion, there'd be another baby, and he would.
I want to make something clear. They did not keep making babies. They kept bullying.
Exactly.
And that led to babies being made.
Yeah.
Right? But coming back to this, a people's love for an island rich with calypso, carnival, cricket, and salty air. The only mention of carnival was in the chapter or section titles when there was like a time jump. The only mention of calypso outside of the like one little fetten ting was again in the titles, to my recollection. Like, it did not really play a role in this
There
book.
was
Well,
there
that's
was
how
no
she met
role.
the guy on the train, but like it wasn't enough to be mentioned in the blurb in this massive way.
That's what I'm saying,
And
right? Like
Carnival-
it wasn't significant.
In
Brief.
Carnival, there was one mention, but it was only for Farouk's point of view because he was noticing the bottoms and the boobies, and it was like one sentence, just Farouk's eyes wandering. That was it.
Yes, right. So like there's nothing here. Cricket and salty air. We got a cricket scene, and there was a little talk. Bree got disconnected.
Spray. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, when she's back. But there was this little. Okay, there we go. Welcome back.
I don't know what happened.
So good. We were just saying about there was some mention of cricket, and I would give it enough because there was a whole cricket scene. I will accept that. Okay, you have cricket in your blurb, fine. And then this cricket and salty air. We had like
One
first of
scene on the
all,
beach.
yeah, we had one scene on the beach, but also like the whole island not salty like that, dog. Like the whole island. This is not salty air. You go in the middle of blast the downtown now. See how much salty air you find. Right? The only salt in that air is body odor. Like that is the only salt that you are doing. That is the only salt. That is the only salt that you will see. Okay. It don't matter how close to the waterfront you are. Because at this point,
And they
well, I mean, maybe
Carnival.
was not so nasty, but I don't know.
Yeah. But then too, there wasn't like enough of a like Carnival is the street parade, and and they spoke about a fete. Jacqueline went to a fete, right? Which party, whatever, right? And she went to a fete. I didn't see nobody standing up in the stands in North Stand or wherever watching mass take place and watching the costumes. I hear nothing about all the things that are actual carnival, right?
That one I will
What's that?
I said that one I will push back again because I think that this comes back to this idea of that there is no monolith, right? There is no one experience of Trinidad or one experience of our festivals or one experience of that. And I can appreciate, if anything, that was something that I liked about this, because when you think of modern Caribbean stories or modern Trini stories, that kind of pretty mass carnival where you're in the stands and you're winding down the place or a pan and all of that, not to say that you didn't have similar or even the same experiences in the 60s or the 40s, but that is
not everybody is going to go for that experience. I was answering it in terms of being falsely advertised.
Yeah.
Fair. Yes, fair.
Because even if we're not doing somebody's many stands, if we're not doing pretty much, we're not doing any of those things, even the ideas of she's a seamstress, which means somebody coming to her to fix up a little something to go down the road and lime or go by the bar. And like there were none of those kinds of elements worked into it where I feel like, oh yeah, boy, it's really carnival time because there's a different kind of busyness in the air. Not even wanting to see a pretty mass or hey, talk about the Marsh Girl or any of those things, but just more suggestions that this is the time. If that doesn't happen, then don't put any blue.
Yeah. So in terms of false advertising,
I have no idea exactly. That was a big one. I have no idea what the experience of Carnival was like between the 40s and 60s, right? I never bothered to read it. I never bothered to check. I live in the 40s to 60s, right? And my mother was what? At best, at her oldest, she was maybe 5 years old. And my father at his oldest was maybe 7 years old at that time. Like, no, 7 or 9. I can't remember. Anyway, he was in the double digits, right? So like even they probably don't know a whole lot. I can probably ask because my grandmother was a seamstress. And I could ask my mother about that. But like that is the kind of thing that I know would have been spoken about, right? Is what you're describing there. Like even if they're not participating in Carnival, somebody come in and make me a little, I want a little hot number for that makes sense.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanna maybe segue into some of the things that maybe we did like about this book. I thought that it was well written.
It was very well written.
I do think that in terms of the craft of writing, this person was really quite good. What next? What else did we like?
I like some of the plotting. Like not everything was given away, right? So I like that there was a surprise here and a surprise there and a surprise there. And it was these little, and they were these little gems, like when she found out that the brothers were still alive and living with her father. Like I really I like that, probably because I'm a parent and I really don't want my children to go missing or end up dead, right? And I like that. I liked that he recognized that while he was trying to work a obeah, or perform magic on Marcia, that the obeah woman, I forget her name, she was also working obeah on him to get him to be with her daughter. Right. So she was working, and like I could have
Gertrude?
like I wished Gertrude. Right. I wish Gertrude could have been worked on more. Right. But things were held back, and we got that scene in the end where he chose to go and do this. Throw it away and get what we call a bush bath to cleanse himself of all these things that he had done. I liked that. I liked that had been incorporated, and it was just so obvious that he would have done it. She knew that he was gonna do it. She knew that he was gonna come to her, right? And I like that she was just fucking evil. I like that. You know what I mean? And I wish that had been developed more, but
Marcia and threatening her, super evil. That scene,
I loved it. Yeah. And I liked it, and I liked it because it was a bad person, a person being bad and selfish. And it was like a lot of people don't like to do that. They like to give people that, like, oh well, she had her reasons, etc. And it's like, I mean, she's like, now I like you for my daughter, and just because my daughter not old enough to be with a man doesn't mean I'm not going to make sure you get together when the time is right. Right? And it was just, it could have been developed more, but like I said, there were these little gems that were just speckled through that made it an enjoyable read. And that is why in the beginning, I think before we went live, when I said with some editing, this could have been like a really, really good thriller.
I would have seen it more as a drama, like one of those long spanning.
This is absolutely a drama.
Yeah, I can't think of an example, but I definitely, as I was reading this, I was like, this should be a movie, because you can skip the generations, you can kind of see it. It could be very visual.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been very impactful, especially for maybe Trinis and non-Trinis alike. Because then I could have visualized maybe the way it should have been and not the way I kind of just imagined it based on the writing and what I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So a movie, I think this would be a wonderful movie. It would be one of those movies you walk out of with a gut punch, but that's kind of the point of drama movies. You tend not to walk out feeling so good sometimes, so.
Yeah.
But I think like,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to agree with you that there were definitely some points where among the pain and among the exhaustion, I was like, oh. So definitely the boys disappearing. And actually when they disappeared, I'm like, they're going to come back. I was like, you don't just talk about them disappearing. Like they wouldn't even be part of the story if they're not coming back, right? So I knew somewhere. So when the secret was revealed that they were alive and well, in the middle, when you find out that it was the uncle, that was a piece of shit, evil. That's another evil mother. We're talking about Auntie Gertrude, but I'm talking about the uncle, man. That's some evil right there. And actually also, well, anyway, so you there's a reveal that he was involved in all of this, and you just have this anger. And then I do like, there was a little resolve, I guess, in the end that Farouk found out through, Zeus, the grandpa. So there was a little bit of a payoff there. I'm like, finally, because if he never freaking knew the truth about Marcia, but then it was just so tragic because it's like he just spent his whole lifetime never actually living with his wife, always butting heads with him and her, not being involved in his children's life. Maybe would the oldest child have turned out differently? Maybe would Yvonne still be alive? So there was definitely a moment of pain when he found out that he didn't have to have left Marcia all this time because of his parents' prejudice of a secret and a rumor that weren't even true. So there was definitely, those were moments that were gut-wrenching for me. And then also I hated, oh my gosh, the couple in Maryland that had her locked up in the barn.
That's another piece of reality that I just can't deal with, because it's real. It is real. This is a real thing that happens and happened.
It killed me.
Right?
How helpless that. And then they're acting all like the woman's just all like blah 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 blah. This is our housekeeper, and I'm just like, get out of there. Oh, and
every second I'm just like, run. But also, where the hell are you going to go?
Where are you gonna go? You don't know where you are. At least in New York City, you could get on a train and maybe find somebody. And New York City has pockets of all types of cultures that I'm glad she found sort of the Caribbean pocket. But the embarrassment I felt at the salon scene.
When they cut her hair,
because they didn't know what they were doing. Yeah.
Listen.
Which is also a very real thing. Like that is still happening today.
Very real. Oh, geez. I want to point out something that Shayna has mentioned. She said that the book made her really hungry. If there's that anyone else, the variety of food emphasized. That's the one thing that I love about Caribbean literature, even though there's so much that I hate about how it tries to push all of Caribbean life into this one specific point of view or like one specific experience, is that across all Caribbean literature that I've read, we always have that appreciation for food and how deeply food is part of our culture and part of our homes and part of our lives, right? That is, the one complaint that I do not have about any Caribbean book is the food. Because if it is one thing that nobody ever seems to get wrong, it's the food. And
because our food is iconic. I'm sorry to say it so, but our food is iconic.
No, it's true. It is very important to us. It is very important to us as Caribbean people. Our food. Yeah. Absolutely.
I could use some chickpeas.
I love how you call it chickpeas.
We say chana.
Yeah, chana. No, she got it. She knows it. She knows.
Chana.
She used both of the books. She called it chana and she called it chickpeas.
Yeah, I think she had to though. Like if she just said chana only, people would be like, "What is this?"
Yeah. Before I moved to New York, I wouldn't have known. Living in New York, actually, fun fact: I never had Indian food living in Florida ever. I had Indian food for the first time when I moved to New York.
What?
Yeah, because Florida, you remember, it's all chains and bullshit. Like, it's Mexican food.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm just like, did I ever have Indian food in Florida? And the answer is only when I cooked it.
Yeah.
Only when I made Indian food did I have
Chinese,
Indian food.
Mexican, Chili's, Applebee's. Like, that was Florida. So New York was an eye-opener for multicultural food. Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember though when I first moved to Florida for school and I learned that you could get Chinese food delivered, blew my mind. I was like, food gets delivered in this country? In Trinidad and Tobago. Now we have like a service that's similar to Uber Eats, right? But that's recent, like that's in the last few years. Because
even 4 years ago when I was in Trinidad, that was not a thing. Like
exactly. When I say the last few years, like it's been less than 5 years. It's been less than 5 years. And I remember getting like over 10 years ago now, like back in 2006, my first year in Florida. And it was like, well, how are we going to go get this Chinese food? Kate, what are you talking about? Chinese food delivers. Chinese food what?
Give them your address. You're good.
Chinese food does what? Good sir? Yeah, that was something else. Oh my goodness. Let's see. So we talked about the things that we liked mostly. I think we really enjoyed the craft. We really enjoyed the food and those descriptors. I think that this was honestly, this is a book that if I did not deeply empathize with some of these problems and like it turned into like a triggering moment for me where I was like, this is too much pain. This is too much pain. I've dealt with enough of this pain, either firsthand or secondhand, right? That I don't want to re-experience this because I have fought hard to never have to experience this again. and if not me personally, then some member of my family, or somebody else close to me. And that was the thing that I ultimately didn't like about this book. But I can appreciate, though, Seidel, what you were saying earlier about how it makes people who have experienced these things, it makes them feel seen. Yeah. And Shayna is giving us. So Julie is about to cook Indian food right now. Yay.
Nice.
And then Chana garbanzo beans.
Oh my
Shayna
god.
and I have this thing where I say garbanzo beans and I say it very badly. I'll say it like it in a weird way. Garbanzo beans, and it's bad. It's horrible, but it makes her laugh every time. So this is an inside joke. All right. But yeah, I feel like that was my big thing, is that it was just too real for me. I don't need to relive these horrible experiences. I want some happiness. Like, I read books for escapism. I want some happiness. And that really, really got me.
I will say there was a couple of scenes with Farouk and his children that that kind of got me, and I could relate to a little bit. Daddy issues, but one thing I just coming from, this was written in like the 40s. We said 40s to 60s.
Yeah, the time period was 40s to 60s.
The way we look at the role of men and women, and remember how the son wanted to be a seamstress. He was good at it. You should embrace your talents regardless. Like, who says a man can't be a seamstress, right? But of course, I guess in those times. But the father then, what I hated was he would have rather, when the daughter came to him, Jacqueline came to him, and she's like, he's running with a bad crowd, he's smoking, he's doing this, he's doing that. And the father would have rather him smoked and caused trouble on the streets, because that was masculine, than be a seamstress. And so that was like,
which is feminine. And it's
that's actually something that I'm not sure I felt was realistic. And I'll explain why.
It's very realistic.
No. Let me explain why. Let me finish. Is that at a certain point in time, remember, being a seamstress or making clothes and being a tailor was actually a profession that men dominated. It was a masculine profession. Right?
There was that.
What's that?
The book dealt with it, where Farouk said he doesn't even make clothes for men.
Right. Yes. But I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate still, because I don't know how to put this. This is perhaps my personal disagreement, because my family, my grandmother is a seamstress, and she learned the trade from her father, right, who made clothes, if I'm not mistaken, for men and women, right? And coming from that, there was a ruckus when he chose to teach her the profession, because she was a woman. Now, I know this because it's something that happened within my own family, which is why when it got to this in the book, I was like, that's weird. I feel
because
like
he's afraid of the homo.
No. I feel like if there was an issue,
it was homophobic.
I'm not saying it wasn't, and I'm not saying that in today's world would not be homophobic. I'm not saying any of that, right? I'm just trying to say that was one of the things that created dissonance for me, right?
But what made it?
Because it was different from your experience.
Exactly, and that comes back to the idea that everybody's experience is different, right? So that, like, my great grandfather taught my grandmother, but to be fair, that was also, that may also have been a little bit further in the past than the 40s to 60s, right? Because I think my grandmother, or perhaps not, because my grandmother would have been learning in the 40s. She would have been learning to be a seamstress in the 40s, and that is when it would have been an issue for her to be. For a woman to be a seamstress. And so for my cognitive dissonance around that was a lot more about, if you want to say the issue is that he's not even making clothes for men, that's one thing. If you want to say the issue is that he's learning the trade from a woman and the woman should never have been in the trade in the first place, that's another thing, right? But that little piece of this profession that was prior like something that was dominated by men, that was considered an acceptable masculine trade, suddenly he's a batty boy for wanting to do that, right? Like that was something that I felt was weird. And I don't know, because, and I think why I felt it was weird is because knowing what my family's experience is, I don't know if this is a historically accurate thing.
Well,
like, is it to say that it was both, or is it one or the other, you know?
Yeah, I think it's both, because similarly, my great-grandfather was a tailor / seamstress. I don't know.
I don't know what
taught my grandmother, who then taught my mother. And while that's not their main profession, it is just a trade that they now have. I think maybe keeping in mind that we're talking about also a time of war and or coming off of war, and what men would have left the communities to do.
Right.
And that would have been deemed as masculine, deemed as a fighter and a warrior and a protector. And so that shift of jobs, that shift of roles now falls on women to do all of these other homely things and all of these domestic tasks.
That makes sense.
So that shifts the lens of, well, this is now more a feminine thing. And so I guess in this period of transition, because I don't think it was like one or the other, I think it's a place where both exist, where it's a transition of trade.
Yeah.
And not just that, I'm also like, when I read it, what I saw, because a lot of the tailors that I knew were men. When I read it, I'm like, is he like projecting his guilt? Like,
that's
he's
what I was
not
going to
around
get at.
teach
That's
him,
definitely, I think that
because
was definitely
the book stated that if you don't, like, you know your father is shit if you don't know how to play cricket.
Play cricket, yeah.
And,
Yep.
and he did
And
not
that was
know
a
how
big
to
deal
play
for
cricket.
all of the children, though, not just the boy, not just Wesley. That was for
Right.
all of the children.
Well, that's what I was going to
Exactly.
say, because
But he can't.
Hold on, I want to hear Talia. Let me hear what Bree has to say.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think Farouk, the whole story, held a lot of judgment for his children for their choices, especially the oldest daughter, they got into a lot of trouble over. A lot of judgment over his children, wishing they would be one way or another. Why are you getting involved with men? Why are you smoking? Why are you going to be a seamstress? All this bullshit. But then not being an active part in their life. So how can you judge your children and how they're doing when you left them with Marcia and she's doing the best that she can? You don't get a say if you're not there to help raise your children. If you are just giving money and rent.
There was a time he wasn't even doing that. There was a time that is the thing. And this is why I said I think the tailoring wasn't about the tailoring. Keep in mind, we're still talking about Caribbean parents, right?
I want to go off on
sorry, my screen just blacked up. There's a point I was trying to make.
Well, I think that what Julie is saying is relevant to you, is relevant to what you want to say. And that thing about Caribbean parents. So I just want to bring it up. Julie is mentioning that it's homophobic with these misogynistic roots, like many things, such as wearing heels. And the process is, men doing something, women learn it, women learning it, now it's a feminine thing. So now men can't do it because it's going to make it gay. And I think that's a lot like that progression we were talking about, where there was this transitioning period where it used to be something for men and now it's something for women, and therefore men can't do it, right? And Talia, I feel like that's foundation to start with your talk about Caribbean parents, because I feel like I know where that's going. So bring it.
No, actually, well, I was trying to say it. So what I was going to say is that there was his guilt, and because he has his guilt, and his guilt is so painfully obvious with the cricket, he has to find something else that he can feel less guilty about. And it's like, okay, whatever. And and he latched on that, because again, yes, it goes to what she said, but it was more, to me, it was more about Farouk recognizing his own failure as a parent, his own failure as a father, which falls into his own failure as a man.
Absolutely.
And he does not want to see his failure as any of that. He is this renowned police officer, and he also had his own deep, like I saw, it was mentioned, but I saw it as they were thinking, as like, he's the shortest of 4 boys. He's not a doctor, he's not an engineer, he didn't study anywhere, he just take little passes and go on and become a police officer. And it took so long for him to move from one rank to the next. So there were like these things that were in his mind, that he's a failure, right? And his son not being able to play cricket, which was the mark. That was like the defining moment of him being a failure as a father. He could not face that, along with everything else he couldn't face. And to me, that was him projecting his failure onto something else that he could have blamed his wife and son on. And that is what I saw.
Do you guys think that him killing the dude who his daughter was sleeping with was like an over exaggeration projection? Like I don't think he had to kill him. I think he could have beat him up real bad. But like the actual killing him was probably like, I fucked up so bad that my daughter is here, giving herself away for God knows what. I feel like that was like an extreme, like I fucked up. You know, I don't think he had to kill him. I think he could have like busted him up, but he didn't have to kill him.
That I disagree with a little bit, because I think that it don't matter. This comes back to the stereotype of West Indian parenthood, is that that's my child, and it don't matter how crap of a parent you are, right? That's my child, and I go kill you. And when you start looking at the further from like within West Indian stereotypes, we look at Indo-Caribbean stereotypes and that kind of like crazed passion that we stereotype Indians as having, right? That's my child, I'll go kill you. And that's what you do, you kill the man. Honestly,
he get no kind of jail time, nothing for that, because they all understood that that's what child was gonna do.
They cut off the man's finger though.
But how much of that, to Brape's point, is still rooted in this idea of hyper-masculinity? Because it's also this idea that East Indian men are effeminate for whatever reason. And so now it's even more of a proclamation of your masculinity, of your manhood, of your strength and your prowess to kill a man because you touched my child, or condemn your son because he wants a soul. Like, it's all of those reinforcements of this toxic idea of what a man should be and what masculine performance looks like.
Absolutely, I agree.
Because at the end of the day, look, if he did his job and him and Marcy communicated and they raised the children together, would his daughter have still been there?
I mean,
maybe, but
also she might have had a couple more options.
Yeah.
But Farouk, and I wanna bring this a little bit into a plague upon Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps other Caribbean countries, and I'm just not as deeply familiar. But the issue of racism was the issues of racism within that family. Because I started reading, so I read in this book, and when I reached Farouk part now, of course the first BL points out that toxic masculinity is a problem for Southeast Asian diaspora men. So yeah, I think that's definitely, there's definitely like an archetype or stereotype or monolith or whatever we want to call it now because we've used all of these words thus far for what masculinity looks like or how it's performed, right? And I think culturally as well as often physically, that's not what many men look like or experience, right? In the West. So anyway, back to the issue there. I'm reading this and I'm seeing how this Indian man loving up this not Indian. I mean, I get the impression I was not going to say. I get the impression that Marcia Garcia is what we would refer to here in Trinidad and Tobago as a red gal, right? Or red woman. Was that?
I say I have a joke from that because her name is Garcia and she's a redo with curly hair. I kind of saw her as looking like say Destra Garcia sister. Like that could have been like Destra grandmother. She's certainly described like that, huh? Yeah, that is like. I wonder if Lauren and Destra related, boy, because it's a Garcia thing. That's a troll.
So that's kind of funny. But what I want to say now, oh yes, so this Indian man running down this red thing, and I want to be clear because I know that, and I know Shane and I have talked about this, is that here in Trinidad and Tobago, because like in America, that is a derogatory term for indigenous people, right? When you say red, and they'll use they'll use like other terms like specifically about your skin, etc., to describe you. But here in Trinidad and Tobago, I do not believe it's considered a derogatory term. It's just kind of a descriptor, right? Like, here's an Indian girl, right? Yeah, so it's a red girl, and it really just means that you have mixed heritage and you're fairer skinned. Yeah, because if you have mixed heritage and you're darker skinned, well, then you're a darkie, right? You're a sexy darkie. But
Yeah.
but if you're exactly, but if you're lighter skinned or you're fairer skinned, then he's a red girl, or man, I guess. And that's just something here. So like any non-Trinidadian watchers, right? This is not us being racist asses. This is really just how we describe. It's just a descriptor, like saying Indian or dark or black or anything else.
I figured she looked a little differently, and there was also this big difference between the city and the country, because the parents had such a disdain. Like, they made it very clear, like, who you rolling around with, da 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 da. Like, they quickly like discredited the marriage immediately. So I got the prejudice.
I don't think. But the prejudice was, and I don't doubt that. And this is another issue with friggin' like literature that people put on pedestals out of the Caribbean, is that it always must have some like deep rural element. And I mean, I don't want to disregard the deep rural element, because I mean, we have people living in rural Trinidad still. Like, this is like life in some parts
And
of
their
Trinidad
stories deserve to be told as well.
Exactly, and their stories do deserve to be told. But like, I have also noticed that this is a regularity in literature that is often a claim from the Caribbean, and particularly Trinidad, is that if you don't have that element of rural life, then this is not a book from Trinidad.
No,
right?
It has to be from the 60s, and it has to be rural, because the only thing that existed in the 60s was rural, apparently. Like, those two, that's the only thing that comes out of Trinidad.
Never mind.
There's no city or suburb or town or no.
Exactly.
But it's
right?
so funny though, because I had to look it up on the map, and I'm like, first of all, I had to see how big Trinidad was. It's not much bigger than Puerto Rico. And so
it's a lot smaller than Puerto Rico.
It was, yeah. So I was looking, I'm like, they're small places. You could probably drive around the island in a day.
Yeah, in less than a day.
So then I was like, wait, so like there's this huge prejudice between, what was it, Tunapuna and Blanchishe. And I was like, they're like right there. That's like driving from, I don't know, Brooklyn to Yonkers. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Yes.
You should hear how Mount Lambert and Mount Hope people speak about each other. And they literally are across the road, the main road from each other.
Very literally across the road.
Small island.
It is tiny. Right? It's tiny. I will say that the thing that that prevents people from driving around the island in like a day or less is honestly the quality of the roads. The road quality is trash depending on like where you are or where you get. But anyway, that's beside the point. I will say that the main issue of prejudice, though, while I don't doubt that there is that prejudice between like rural and not rural, right? The main prejudice was the racial prejudice. Because if he had gone and he had picked up some like sweet little Indian thing from wherever, right? No. But their problem was that she wasn't Indian. And like that perhaps was one of the things that was too real for me. Not necessarily because my family is like that. Thankfully, my family is not. But I know families that are. I certainly, and when I say my family, I mean my immediate family. Yeah? Let me not talk about my extended family, because I am certain that there are members of my extended family that would take one look at me and my husband.
Less than pleased that your choice of husband.
You are certainly less than pleased. But to be fair, I don't talk to those members of my family, and so for all I know, they don't even know that I am married, but that's who I'm married to. But that's a thing that like still exists today. And while I appreciate that my family isn't like that, I read that in the book, and that was one of the things that made me like my blood just boil. Like,
well, you wrote in one of your poems, I remember, it was that people say like light is right.
Yeah.
And then so
yeah. But it didn't matter that she was light skinned, right? It just mattered that she was not Indian. Right.
I think it was specifically because it sounded like she was like a light-skinned Negro girl. You know what I mean? Or light-skinned and definitely mixed with black because we heard all about Chibamsi, so we know, right? And the thing is, he wanted her so badly. He wanted to have her that he went to obeah woman to be able to possess her, and then still would not give
He
her the
chose-
honor, the proper honor of having met his family,
Yeah.
of marrying her and meeting his family.
And remember, she dropped the about having a kid, and they're like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
He didn't even tell his
Tell
family
them.
that they had
Yeah.
a child.
Mm-hmm.
So you want her so bad, but you're not willing to own it.
And that's another thing that totally because it's too real. It's too real. That was
That's
all. That's just real stuff that has happened. That is happening. That will probably continue to happen, particularly in this country where stuff like that happens. I think it's slightly harder to get away with now because social media and photos and those things, but that it still happens.
I
right?
think it was the wrong reaction, though. You hear you have a grandchild. Your reaction is, "Oh my goodness, can I meet them? Are they healthy? What is their
No,
name?"
That is
For
not how
starters,
things
the
Not
are.
when
mother
you're
was
so
still
seated in your.
Seidel and Natalia.
I was gonna say, not when you're so seated in your prejudice, not when you're so deeply rooted in your ideas of what a family should look like and what these perceived
what
stereotypes
my
of other
son
people
family
look
is
like.
supposed to be like.
Exactly.
It's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to read because in my head it's just like family is family. You don't say who did you marry, why did you marry them. It's you have a child. This is your family now. Like we're family.
Yeah.
Remember
So
when
it
she was
was-
first introduced, she wasn't even introduced as his wife. The mother thought she was there as a
Yeah.
seamstress,
As a seamstress,
Yeah.
yes.
to work as a seamstress.
Yeah. Oh no.
So she was. That's the thing. So first I hear, this black girl.
BL says look at
Yeah.
the royal family.
Mhm.
Not wrong.
even the ending when Jackie went to the grandparents and says, "I am the son of or I'm the daughter of Farouk," and they were like, he's like, I don't have a son. I don't have a son.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is your grandchild. She is a grown, like she's 18 at this point. Like she's a grown woman, and you are just gonna like, oh, I don't know who that is. That's
Something
not
I want to point out about that is that they did let her use the phone, right? But she made it clear that she needed to call her mother because Farouk was in the hospital. And you may notice that at no point were we made aware of whether or not the parents made it to the hospital to see.
Oh, no,
they did.
They didn't.
Because they didn't.
Sure
Yeah,
they
no,
did.
I certainly didn't. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, that was a point for me. I think that was a point well made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think I cut off somebody's Seidel.
Yeah,
Is that
but
you?
I don't know what I was going to say. I was going to say, right, even the idea of this kind of disdain for the grandchildren, because oftentimes, at least in my experience, you will find people who don't like the spouse but have a space in their heart for the grandchildren, for the offspring. So if you come with your father, I will line with you, I will talk to you, I will figure out how you're going, I will send a little something for you. Even that just entire excommunication of the entire family, of not even acknowledging these grandchildren, was strange to me.
Because children don't ask to be born.
I understand why, but it was strange because in my experience,
The
it's
thing
always
is,
been like, there's a space for
the thing is, Farouk knew. He knew that if he had hooked up with this black girl, and I'm saying it the way I know the parents would have been thinking, he knew that if he had married her, this would have been his parents' reaction. He knew. He still did what he did, and then turned around and refused to do right by his wife, right? Because she is now ostracized, right? And one thing I noticed in the book that again took me out of the story was that the children weren't referred to as Douglas, because Indian people
That was
consider it a
something that I thought was
derogatory.
weird.
It was weird. You're talking about a Douglas family. The girl mix, the children mix, right? And nobody referred to them as them Douglas children from a Five Rivers side or Pune side. Pune
That's
side.
true. That's true.
Right? And
I wonder how
it's not as term as derogatory as referring to a mixed person as a mutt. It's a word that has been reclaimed, and we kind of use it we use it to mean almost anybody that's obviously mixed.
But
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
it's specific though, right? Like I've never heard
like, we
somebody
use
call
it-
a Douglas if you're not clearly Indian and like
Oh no,
Aboriginal.
yeah, mixed with Indian, yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta be mixed with Indian to be, a Douglas.
Yeah.
But nowhere in that book was it used. Not derogatorily, not as a general descriptor, which is what would have happened.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right.
Right, and I noticed that, and like so that was one thing I noticed. And Farouk knew what he was doing. He was causing his children and the mother of his children to be ostracized, because once she was ostracized in her village for being a victim of incest, right? And of course, the usual victim blaming that is coming to. Then when she moved, she was a single parent, right? And then she was the single mother who keep having children. Like, she was the one having the children repeatedly, and clearly wasn't good enough to keep she man. And I'm telling you, the village talk, right? That is the village talk that would have happened.
Go ahead, Kay. Did anybody
No,
want?
I agree. I agree with everything that Talia is saying. I wonder if anybody saw at the end that there was a list of references.
Yeah, to a couple
No,
of books and so on.
There was a list
Yeah.
of references at the end. Hold on, I'm pulling it up now. Because Kotisi Kotela is one of the references. So it says sources, Kotisi Kotela, Nelson's New West Indian Readers, Capitalism and Slavery, and then History of the People of Trinidad and Tobago, right? Published in 1942. So I thought it was really interesting that you needed to go to Kotisi Kotela.
Well, I just think
No, did anybody else think that was weird? Like
is this
No,
references
actually,
as in
no.
references that she's used to write this book, or is it references for the reader of like other?
it just says
like,
sources.
places
No,
to
it
go?
says sources. It says sources.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
why I
it
thought
says
this was
sources.
weird. I thought this was
Okay.
odd.
No.
For me, I thought it was weird, but I liked it.
I did
It's
like
like,
it. I did like
well,
that she put
I
those
like-
in there. But I was
Because
also
in
like,
Nelson's New West Indian Readers, she quoted directly from it, so
Yes.
that kind of needed to be there. Probably she probably got permission
yes.
from that.
yes.
Kotisi Kotela, if that one is the iffy one, not Eric Williams' book at all. But Kotisi Kotela, you ought to know how to spell Sukuya properly, and I know that because I went and checked it. I have a copy, and I went and checked to see how it was spelled in that book.
Why did you need Kotisi?
Because when I saw it in the
But is she?
Was-
What is the origin of this writer again? She's
she's
Trinidadian.
I think she was born in New York, but her parents are
she was
Trinidad.
born in New York. Yeah.
Well then, yeah. So she need another source. If she's
Okay,
not growing up,
that's
in,
fair.
because
That's
for
fair.
me spending 24 years in Trinidad, growing up in Trinidad, seeing kind of beginning of adulthood in Trinidad, it have real things I know, but I have friends who are out here now who spent their formative years out here. So they spend like the first
Right. Okay,
5,
so they need it. Okay,
7
that's
years.
fair. That's fair. That's fair.
They need a frame of reference of like
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But
That
and
makes
it makes
sense.
sense.
Because
yes.
I was just kind of like, what was this book for? Because I also felt like she didn't use a lot of words
she didn't.
that required a reference. The only phrase that I heard her, because like it's not like she even, like you said, it's not like she even used Douglas. I wonder though how much of that was because she was afraid it would be considered derogatory.
Mm.
Like it would be, because like today, in today's world, I mean, she used the N-bomb though,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't care if that was derogatory. So like,
Right. And
Um,
Douglas is a much more obscure obscure as a derogatory term. Like I think it's only sometime in the past 5-10 years, I think I found out that Douglas was derogatory.
initially derogatory.
Or it had
yeah.
derogatory
Yeah.
origins, I should say. But
Yeah.
again, you're going back to Kotisi Kotela with that. And there were terms, if you had used the book, if you had genuinely used the book, there's a lot of things you would have gotten correct. You would have been able to spell Sukuya correctly. You would have said free paper bun, B-U-N, because you used it from the book.
Wait,
Right,
is
or
it in
even
the
if
book?
you
Is that
say,
in Potesipotela?
yes, they have phrases.
Man, no, I never really checked Potesipotela. I
That's
bought it.
Potesipotela is a nice little
No,
bookshelf.
I've bought it for friends,
Piece.
and I think that my mom has a copy, but I always had access to mommy's copy if I felt like I needed a voice, so I did never have my own. But like I also like never, if I really had a question like, "Oh yes, does that mean?" I just ask another Trini. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
But that is a privilege that I have.
Not
Right.
everybody has.
Yeah, exactly. That is a privilege that I have. That is a privilege that I have.
Right.
And I will fully admit that. That is a
And
privilege.
Miguel bought it. Miguel have the book. It's a really old copy that he got, right? And I genuinely, because some of the terms are outdated. Like we have like Jim Hasikara, when our prime minister used it, there were a lot of people my age that didn't know what it meant.
Yes.
I knew what Hasikara and Janjat mean because I have East Indian heritage, and I would have heard my cousins use it, right? You're like,
that's an East Indian thing.
Right.
I mean, I can't say obviously I know it, but I am East Indian. I didn't know it was an East Indian thing. I was just like, that had to be Janjat. I knew was certainly East Indian.
Okay, so we have to pause because I realized I don't know what we're talking about. So that we definitely don't know what we're talking about.
Basically, a Janjat.
I don't know what we're doing anymore.
A Janjat is somebody who does make bacchanal, and a Hasikara is bacchanal.
Okay.
I get that right, Nicola?
Yeah, Hasikara is bacchanal,
right.
And Janjat is the bacchanalist.
Yes.
You know, if I'm passing these words correctly.
That I believe that is accurate. Yes.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks.
And again, like I said,
this is actually a brilliant. I actually want to pause here and like pull on this particular thread, because this is clearly a brilliant example of how even within Trinidad there are silos of language. Because look how Seidel, and I sure Seidel know way more Creole than me. But through drama, if nothing else, right? Because a lot of like drama schooling here in Trinidad and Tobago leans very deeply on our Afro-Caribbean heritage and our Afro-Caribbean roots, right? And not to say that there's no East Indian heritage in that, but the vast majority of that is Afro-Caribbean based. And then here, me and Nicola, like obviously, like how did you not know what that word meant? And that's very, I think that's a really interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
And it's a word I didn't. Okay, when I heard it from our prime minister in that speech he made last year, it felt new, and I was like, no, but I know what this meant, and I was excited because I had not heard this word in such a long time, and. Like I went back and I remembered playing that section, and I was like, oh yeah, that, and I picked up from context because I remembered hearing it, but I couldn't remember what it meant. I couldn't remember the context, and again, a lot of people weren't looking it up, and this is when I found out that even though it was in my memory, repressed as it was, that there were people that didn't know of it at all, and like when you're talking about like different silos and different points of language, look at Sawa and the Quizzy, for example, or San Juan and the Quizzy, right? Sawa is Spanish, but Quizzy definitely has French origins, and it's the mixing and matching and this fusion of language that we have that I felt I missed it in the book. Nobody said anything like had was to, well, had was to go down the road.
At least they just said come go,
and I want to, right? And I remember I had I have an old boss who he was so fascinated by our language, right? And he was like, you guys take words and you like put them together. And you make like one word. Do you have like I can't see any like real German like influence, because the Germans do that where they make a compound word, and we have things like like one not one time. One time is not specific to this example.
Was wait, you mean what is?
Right. And dies that. Dies. That is. That's our contraction. And we will say things like me no. Me, no, but we say it so quickly, it's me, no. It's one singular word. And that was, she got the language so close, and it's like a seeing the Trini in you. I know you spend every July, August vacation in Trinidad. I know you spend Christmas in Trinidad. I didn't feel like she got sorrel and ginger beer in New York. I didn't feel that. I feel like she came to Trinidad and got that. That is how I felt.
That's also like, did y'all hear there was ginger beer? Was there any like pastels and sorrel?
No.
There was one mention of sorrel.
Okay.
But ginger beer was, because you get Jamaican ginger beer. There's a brand called Jamaican ginger beer, and they get ginger beer in the stores, and ginger beer seems to be pretty Caribbean. So if you think of New York as having a very Caribbean diaspora, instead of just looking at the Guyanese and the Jamaicans, the Bajans, and the Bahamians, etc., so you'll get a lot of that. I think there's like 2 other countries that do sorrel, but it's not as popular in the US. So she would not have known it. She could not have pulled that. And I liked it because I saw her. I saw Lauren, the New Yorker, with Caribbean, with Trini heritage, right? I saw that disconnect, and I saw like she was trying to pull that, and I like that about it. But I also didn't like it because I was reading. I'm supposed to be reading a Trinidadian talking about their Trini experience.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I mean when I was like, I hate reading books like these where it's somebody who's not from Trinidad who's trying to write about the Trinidadian experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not from Trinidad and you have Trini roots, fine, write it, embrace it. Embrace the fact that you're not Trini enough and that you're not American enough. At the same time, you are enough. You know, embrace the fact that in that intersection, you are enough. And it's not about being too Trini or too American or not enough of one or the other. Embrace that middle ground, right? Embrace that you are enough where you are. You know what I mean? And you don't need to be in one or another place. And I just can't shake the feeling, like I can't. Maybe it's bad. Maybe it's just discriminatory on my part, you know. But like, if you're trying to write, fine, then that's it. Then that's maybe an asshole.
Right. I only say yes because this type of story that she's trying to tell requires her so deeply to be Trinidadian in the way that she's telling it. You know what I mean?
No,
because she's telling it from first person.
That's my point, though. Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, I think that I recognize her, you know. She is born in New York with Trini roots. If she wanted to talk about her experience, like coming home and what it was like to visit home and all of that, or if she wanted to do it the way that Nicola was describing it earlier, Talia, whatever name you're going by today, the way Christine. I'm just
joking.
But then it wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be this story. Then it would have had to be like.
It would have been a different
90s.
story, but that is something that I always like feel a how about. But the reason I feel a how isn't because she's telling the story. But the reason though that I feel a how isn't because she's trying to tell the story. You know, for her, she can tell the story, and I think she can tell the story. But like, why? It's kind of like I feel like she's taking up a space where a Trini telling a Trini experience could take up a space.
But that's a very I don't know the word for it type of view because it suggests that there's only one story that can ever be told. Trini telling a Trini point of view story still could be told and be just as valid and valuable, and she could still tell the story and it'd be valuable.
I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. I do agree with that, which is why I'm trying to find the words. But I think my issue is not that she's telling the story, you know, is that I am a Trini reading an experience of a Trini, but I could tell that this is not an experience of a Trini that was written by a Trini. That is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't want to read an experience of a Trini and try to like sit in the seat of this Trini and be like, but this missing a lot of things that I know are essential to Trinidadianism.
Do you mean it didn't feel authentic?
Yes, I mean it did not feel authentic. There we go. Thank you. Words. Jesus.
Yes. And the thing is, I think an omniscient third-person view. You could have split it between, you know, the dad, the mom, Jacqueline. You know, you could have done that in an omniscient third-person view, but telling like this is the story of dad, this is the story of mom, this is the story of the daughter. And
I would have
everything-
had less issues with that, yes.
Yeah, because I'm okay. Like okay. You and I are friends, Bree, and you're like, I God forbid died, and you're telling this story because I related to you personally. I didn't tell anybody else, and you're now telling my story for whatever reason. You think it's great. The world needs to know it, and you're gonna tell. Are you gonna say I to mean I Nicola or I Talia, or are you going to be like, and she did this and she did that?
I see what you're
You know-
saying. It could take more care to
That's
Yeah,
it.
like
That's-
put herself.
because I can understand.
Yeah.
I understand
Because,
that you
like-
don't know these words like Dogla and Miano or the correct accepted version of Sukuya, or is it Kweze, right? The Kweze that
maybe they
that
just felt
bothered
it
me
that way
most of
in
it.
the 60s. That did bother me a lot. But maybe that's just
Yeah.
how they did it in the 60s. I don't know. And I want to acknowledge a few of those things about my own ignorance, right? Is that, and I'll contradict myself here a little bit too, because I have to agree that I think her story is valid and I think that she deserves to tell her story, right? But I felt robbed in certain aspects because it was lacking. I was supposed to be reading a Trinidadian, speaking of a Trinidadian experience, but it was lacking all sorts of things that I know, even that isn't about my experience, but like the thing like just one kind of mango, like no sorrel, right?
Did it
You
feel
want to
kind of
tell me?
grace?
You want to tell me it had no sorrel up in Blanchisseuse in the 60s?
So I want to echo that, Care, and say that part of me choosing this book was because it was a Trinidadian writer, a
Same.
Trinidadian story.
Part of me
And-
excited to read this book was that.
And
Yeah.
I being so far away from home for the longest I've ever been, and feeling starved of those interactions and that experience, was so desperately looking for a place that I could, whether it was a happy or sad or misfortune or whatever kind of story, I could find some solace in that story. And to your point, I can echo that there were moments of the story that felt I felt robbed. I felt like this isn't what I was expecting. This isn't what I was hoping for, in the sense of a true sort of slice of home, and whatever that may look like. It felt like instead of giving me a full cake with icing and the whole to-do, you just gave me like a one-layer cake. And it was like, here, look, this is what I have for you. When in my mind, you promised me sort of the galore of this 5-layer filled icing, sprinkle. You know what I mean?
You
So
got
I
a black
get-
and
Yeah.
you got a black and white film when you were expecting color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And that doesn't make the film
So-
bad, and that doesn't make the film invalid, and that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
the story doesn't deserve to be told. And I want to emphasize that, because I don't think that it matters whether you are Caribbean diaspora, or whether you're born here, or whether you're raised here, or whether you live in somewhere else. I think your story deserves to be told. And I think that this author, was it Lauren Francis-Sharma? I think that her story and this story that she's written deserves to be told. But I mean, it comes back to that question of false advertising, because I, as a Trinidadian person reading this book, expecting to experience something that I could connect to as a Trinidadian experience, the only part of this that I was able to connect to as a Trinidadian experience were the negative parts, were the parts that were about that shitty West Indian
Parents and
and shitty West Indian struggle, you know. And don't get me wrong, it's real, and that's why I was able to relate it and why I could connect it. But we have happiness too, and we have sorrel and gingerbread and pastels, and we have parang, and I'm pretty sure that parang existed in the 60s, right? Like, I mean, and that is something that I had to try to hold myself back about too, is because I don't know anything about the lived experience of people in these times. You know what I mean? I don't know anything
just
about the
that
lived.
we're going back to the whole thing up. Sorry,
Yeah, well,
we're going
I don't
back
know
to
you.
monolith.
Yes, right.
You hearing me now? Right.
Yeah,
We're
we
going
go
back
back
to
to
the idea that
but
we are
like
not a monolith. She inherited so many books that these children were devouring, right? We heard, and they were clearly reading it, and they were clearly enjoying it. And at no point did I, we are not playing cricket in the road barefoot. Not everybody climbing a mango tree, right? I mean, it sounds very hypocritical because I have a junior mango tree in my front yard that I grew up with. But, not everybody has that particular experience, but there are people here that read, that love to read. And me and here that this one sprawl off on the bed when she should have taken the chicken out of the fridge because she hit the sweet spot in the book. And when she hears she mother come in by the door,
Well, I
she
mean, you
now
notice it's not a
scrambling.
fridge, it's an icebox, sense.
It's an icebox. But I mean, at the same time, you have your chores that you're supposed to be doing, but you're deep in this book, right? Those are experiences that may not necessarily be indigenous to Caribbean people, but they're experiences that Caribbean people also have. Just like we fall in love, just like we love the right people, just like we love the wrong people, just like we go to school, just like we pass exams, like we fail exams. These are things that I think would have made her book so much richer. And I feel like I kind of nitpicking on the book because I enjoy the book, but I can see where the book could have been. Like
I agree. I think it was written. It was written beautifully.
Yes, we get all the.
It was written beautifully.
There were things that I want. Yeah. Yeah, I liked certain things that she said. There was one part I was like, "Oh, I copied it to save it. I highlighted it," where she said that boys have their own words when girls are silent. They create their own words.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of Jacqueline's experience with this boy in this woman's house, and I thought of, okay, so she had to be very, very clear on consent because she's a quiet girl, right? And she had to be very, very clear that this is something she did not want, right? And she had that experience of having to defend her consent. And I thought of what happened to her mother, where her mother did not consent to having obeah worked on her.
Well, I mean, does anybody
consent to obeah? I kind of feel like anybody's walking into this thing willy-nilly. Yeah,
I mean, the only consent to obeah is the one where you ask, where you asking for something for you. That is the only situation, right? Like in which there is some kind of consent.
Yeah, and it's like it goes back to that where, I mean, yeah, it doesn't exist then. That's like saying, well, I consented to, the R word, for example. But I saw the parallels in what went on with them. I saw what went on with Jack in that moment, and those things that are quote unquote universal. And you were using universal bad experiences. You could have included some universal good experiences, right? And that was
To be fair, though, I think that in theory, there were some universal good experiences, right? Like there was a little party that she had in New York. There was a little cricket. There was, and those are just sort of brief. They were just sort of these brief moments of what life could be like outside of that. But it is 5:00, which means that it is time for us to start the wrap up. And give our final thoughts. Bree, I'm gonna let you please go first with your final thoughts because I think the three Trinis have been dominating this conversation with all of our feelings.
It's been enlightening and I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate you. But please.
So my final thoughts as an outsider, somebody who's never been to Trinidad, I found this story interesting. I finished it. I wanted to know what happened. So the author had the ability to grab our attention and captivate us with the miserable lives of each and every character. And I think I kept reading because I kept hoping for some joy for someone. And what little joy I think might have come from the end was not completely fulfilled. So I definitely, I kind of might have even condensed some of the stuff in the middle and made the ending a bit longer. I wanted to see maybe even an epilogue, just like, did the oldest child finally go to New York? Did the teacher ever go visit Jacqueline? Did she open her own seamstress shop? I don't know. I needed a little bit more.
You need a happy ending.
From all of the suffering. And that's not to say that the suffering wasn't a story, like you said, that needed to be told, because I felt it. I read it and I felt the gut punches, and it was not at all a bad story. Definitely the relationship of the children and the father, I felt. One scene in particular where Jacqueline was telling her father again to hang out with your son, talk to your son. He's getting involved in bad things, and he says to her, "Don't talk to me like I'm the child." And she said, "I know I'm your child. I'm not, but like I've done that. I've done that where I have felt like I was the more mature one than the parent, and having to, going up against that wall. Like I really felt for Jacqueline. I think of all the characters, she's the one who I related the most to. So I hope she gets her happy ending. We'll see. But all in all, yeah, it wasn't an island read. It wasn't we're gonna see, beautiful colors and things. It was a story of systemic racism and prejudice and pain, and I got all of that. So I'm glad we read it. I'm so glad I was excited to hear the perspective from the resident Trinis. So overall, good pick, but I feel like I need to go do something happy today after this. And that's what I'll leave it.
Let's do Talia next because it was Seidel's pick, and I want to give Seidel the time to expand on her thoughts if necessary.
I don't like literary fiction. That's a bias I have. I don't like West Indian as a genre, and I feel like this fell into those categories. And again, because this whole one story, a little bit again, there were stories that were coming out of Nigeria, and they all had an acacia tree on the front. All of them, right? And I got that vibe. But then people flee for reasons, and I felt like it told that story. But I enjoyed this book a whole lot more than I enjoyed a couple of the other literary books that we covered, quite frankly. I felt of all, like I real trashed this book, right? On the lack of trininess. And I could still see that pride in her trininess. You know what I'm saying? She is so proud of her grandmother. She's so proud of all that she overcame, and she is so happy that she did that and she came to America. And there were a lot of scenes that I felt were very, very authentic, and there were some that weren't. And we covered that. I won't get into that again. I think I liked this book more than I didn't like it. Right? I think I liked it more than I didn't like it. And I think this book would, again, like I said, with some tweaks, I think this would make an excellent, like mini-series. Right? I would have liked to see a little bit more of the obeah, because the father was clearly under the influence of this thing. And I like that she didn't treat it like a lot of people that go on to westernized cultures. They tend to minimize these things, or they tend to like look down upon it. And she said, look, this is definitely something that is very, very powerful. And she treated it with the respect that I think it deserved. And I absolutely, absolutely loved that. And I would this girl come back to Trinidad and give she 2 rose mango. Unless she eat some long mango chow. Right? And have her try coconut. There are little things that like, come now, girl. Come and get some hog plum. Come and get some governor plum. Right? Not so, because there's almost no, it's like being an American. Like, how do you embody all the qualities that is being an American? Right? And it's just the same for us in Trinidad and Tobago. I will have a different ethnic mix than somebody else. So I will have different influences growing up. Miguel is more Spanish and I am more French. So I grew up with more Creole food. Miguel plays para, for example. Right? And I think she tried to capture everybody. And I think in trying to capture everybody, she failed to truly grasp certain things that she could have picked up on. And I think the fun and games beats, she could have, there were a lot of missed opportunities there, but overall it was a decent book. overall, it was a decent book. It's not going to be a comfort read for me. It is a book I will probably pick up again. I did enjoy it enough to maybe pick it up again if I've overread everything else. But yeah, I generally liked it with some tweaks. That's my final thoughts.
Okay, side out.
I echo a lot of, I think, Bree's sentiments of it being and your sentiments as well, Care, of it being a true story and a hard story, a gritty story. I definitely enjoyed it. And saying that, remembering that I was looking for something different. I went into this hoping for a Trinidad that felt like home, or a Caribbean that felt like home. And when I say home, I guess I mean more comforting or more a place of refuge. And this certainly was not that in this, because of the subject matter, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it was a good read. It was well written. I enjoyed following the narrative. I enjoyed the descriptor. Like, her description is just, it's beautiful. It's very easy to picture and visualize and believe that, oh, this is a place that exists and is real. And I've been there. It's a very, I think, human story. It's in the way that even if we haven't gone through any of these specific situations, we have felt these emotions. We have felt these things. And so I thought that was beautiful and well written. And yeah, I will not be reading it again. It's not a book that I can pick up again, just because it was... Yeah. It's not the escapism that I need in my reading. It's not the break from reality that I need. But it was a beautiful retelling of a thing that had it had definitely had its hits, and it definitely had its misses. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I want to echo everybody else's sentiments, right? I think that this writing was beautiful. Like, if there is a thing that you can fault about this book, its writing is not one of them. Like, it was so well written. It was descriptive without being over descriptive, in my opinion. I think that a lot of books make that kind of mistake where they over describe certain things, and I think this book was just right, and it was really beautiful in how it chose to go about those descriptions. But it comes down to, it had its hits and it had its misses, right? I don't think that it was an invalid story, and I don't think the story should not have been told. But I feel like if you were going to miss the things that you missed, it was better told in a third-person perspective, right? So that we at least didn't feel that cognitive dissonance of, but what about all the other mangoes? What about plum? What about pomerac? What about chow? What about... where is Carnival? You're talking about Carnival, but there's nothing to indicate that Carnival is happening aside from people have mentioned that Carnival is happening, right? Like, there was one fete, maybe, but let's also be real, fetes did happen across the year. It didn't have to be Carnival.
Yeah.
But so there were a lot of misses that I felt if you grew up here, you wouldn't have missed that. But at the same time, there was certainly an embodiment of certain aspects, certain archetypes, I guess. I'll come back to that word of Caribbean life, of West Indian life and West Indian language, right? That I think that she nailed, but then as experientially, were missed. And I will say, though, that this is all through the lens, like things like the spelling and the lack of certain parts of language or words or how certain things were described. I will say that, my own ignorance of what it was like perhaps in that 40s to 60s era is lacking. And maybe I would have a better appreciation for those things that are missing if I knew more about that time period, or, if I had more information on it, maybe I would feel differently about this book. But then I'm also really tired about, hearing stories from that time period only. Right. And again, it's not to say that those books don't exist. Like there is a fantasy book by Lisa Allen Agostini, right? The Chalice Project is fantasy, young adult. It's I don't think it's Trinidad. I think it's Jamaica, though. I'm trying to remember where the Chalice Project is set, but I want to say it might actually be Jamaica. But at any rate, I want to say it's not set in the 60s. Yeah, it's a more modern story, if I recall correctly. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But it exists literature that is either mainstream or just literary fiction, if not genre fiction, that is not set in the 40s to 60s exists. And I would love for publishing to uplift those stories as well, and not just like we've been seeing this monolith of what Caribbean life is like, as though the Caribbean is just between the 40s and 60s. Like the majority of literature that I've read is just set in that time period if it comes out of Trinidad and Tobago. And I really just want to know, like I want to hear and learn about stories that are not in that time. And I want characters that not named Patsy. Patsy and Merle are the quintessential
Gertrude.
the quintessential Caribbean woman names now. Patsy, right? There is a book called Patsy. That one is set in Jamaica, not Trinidad, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a reason for that, and I fed up of it. As a Trini, I am fed up of it. Right? I need more. And I guess as a writer, it's my job to produce more, but I'm trying, and until I get there, please, somebody else. Anybody else? Ooh, all right. Okay, I've ranted. We need to close off because it's a little bit after 5 now. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add before I talk about our next book? Nope. Okay. So we'll be back in 2 weeks from today. So not the 11th, but the 18th. And I believe our book it's a book by Alia de Bodard. And I really hope I get the French part of that name correct, because that's not my forte. But yes, it's The Citadel of Weeping Pearls by Alia de Bodard. And I don't know her personally or anything, but we crossed paths when I was like a teenager, and I was really into her work back then, and I've kind of been interested in and following her work since. So I'm like triple excited to be able to talk about this with you all. So that's really cool for me. Also, I think she was Hugo nominated recently, wasn't she? Was it Hugo or the Nebula? I don't know. I'll look it up. We'll talk about all of those accolades next time. But that's it. I think that's it. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about more books. Goodbye, internet.